There's a reason the same names keep appearing on the wealth leaderboards. And it has nothing to do with working harder, being smarter, or getting lucky. The difference isn't what they do, it's how they think. And once you see it, you can't look away. What you're about to discover will fundamentally alter how you view money, power, and human behavior. Most people will resist these ideas. They'll feel uncomfortable. That discomfort is precisely what keeps them trapped. If you're tired of watching others accumulate wealth while you spin your wheels, hit that like button right now. This isn't feel-good content. It's the uncomfortable truth about how money actually works. Subscribe, because what's coming next will completely change how you see every financial decision you make. You've been taught that wealth is a math problem. Get the right degree, land the right job, save the right percentage, invest in the right assets, follow the formula, and prosperity will arrive. But if it were that simple, every MBA graduate would be wealthy. Every financial advisor would be a millionaire. Every person who reads personal finance books would be financially free. They're not. And the reason reveals everything. Because wealth isn't solved with spreadsheets. It's unlocked through psychology. The philosophers of power understood this long before modern capitalism existed. Niccolo Machiavelli didn't write about money directly, but his observations on human nature revealed something more valuable: the behavioral patterns that separate those who accumulate power from those who serve it. And here's the uncomfortable truth: money is power in its most liquid form. Most people approach wealth like a transaction: hours traded for dollars, skills exchanged for salary, credentials converted to compensation. But this transactional thinking creates a ceiling you'll never break through, because you've accepted a fundamental premise that guarantees limitation, that wealth is earned through labor. The moment you believe wealth comes from effort alone, you've locked yourself into dependence. Dependence on employers, dependence on markets, dependence on permission from systems you don't control. Look around at the people grinding 80-hour weeks. Many of them are brilliant, dedicated, hard-working. Yet they remain perpetually 1 or 2 paychecks away from crisis. Why? Because effort without strategic positioning is just expensive motion. The system isn't broken, it's working exactly as designed. It's designed to convert your time into someone else's wealth. And the moment you accept this exchange as inevitable, you've volunteered for a life of limitation. The emotional trap. Watch how people interact with money, and you'll notice something fascinating. Most relationships with wealth are entirely emotional. Anxiety when checking account balances, relief when paychecks arrive, panic when unexpected expenses appear, joy when bonuses land, dread when bills are due. These aren't just feelings, they're signals of psychological subordination. When money controls your emotional state, you've already lost the game. Compare this to how strategists view resources: cold, clinical, detached. They don't ask, "How much did I make?" They ask, "Where did leverage shift?" That reframing changes everything. Think about the lottery winner who's broke within 5 years, or the inheritance that disappears in a generation, or the athlete who earned hundreds of millions but files for bankruptcy. The numbers changed dramatically, but the psychology stayed poor. This pattern repeats so consistently, it reveals a fundamental truth. Money doesn't transform identity, it amplifies it. If you were impulsive before wealth, you become reckless with it. If you were fearful, you become paranoid about losing it. If you sought validation through spending, More money just means more expensive ways to chase approval. If you are generous to a fault, wealth accelerates the drain. This is why sudden wealth often destroys people rather than liberates them. They never developed the psychological infrastructure to handle abundance. They're like someone handed the controls to a fighter jet with no flight training. The vehicle has capability, but the operator doesn't. The wealthy understand that psychology precedes capital. This is why they invest heavily in mindset shifts before scaling resources. They know that $1 million in the hands of someone with poverty psychology will evaporate, but $1,000 in the hands of someone with wealth psychology will multiply. Consider two people, each receiving an unexpected $10,000. The first immediately thinks about what they can buy: new wardrobe, better car, vacation, relief from pressure. Within months, the money is gone, replaced by the same financial anxiety that existed before. The second person sees $10,000 as positioning capital. They ask, what does this allow me to create? What leverage point can I access? What skill can I monetize? What system can I build? That money becomes a tool rather than a reward. Same amount, completely different outcomes. The difference? Psychology, the positioning principle. Here's where most financial advice fails you completely. It focuses on accumulation when the real game is positioning. Accumulation asks, how much can I gather? Positioning asks, where should I stand? One perspective creates workers, the other creates wealth. Think about physical positioning for a moment. Stand at the bottom of a hill and every drop of water flows past you. Stand at a narrow point in the valley, and you can redirect the entire stream. Same resources flowing through the system. Completely different outcomes based purely on position. Money flows the same way. It doesn't circulate evenly. It pools around certain structures, certain roles, certain strategic points in value chains. If you're not building one of these collection points, you're feeding one. This is why working hard feels like running on a treadmill. You're expending energy without changing position. The view never shifts. The outcomes never fundamentally alter. You might get promoted, but you're still trading time for money. The exchange rate improved slightly, but the fundamental dynamic remained unchanged. Most people optimize within their current position, negotiating for slightly higher salaries, switching to companies with better benefits, adding credentials to their resume. These are lateral movements disguised as progress. They feel like advancement because income increases, but the structural relationship to wealth hasn't changed at all. Meanwhile, those accumulating real wealth aren't competing on the same axis. They're not asking, how can I be more valuable to an employer? They're asking, how can I make myself unavoidable within a value exchange? Let me illustrate this with a concrete example. Imagine two software developers with identical skills. Developer A works for a tech company. Excellent salary, great benefits. They're talented, reliable, and well compensated. But they're also replaceable. The company could hire another developer with similar skills. Their value is tied to their output. Developer B built a tool that solves a specific problem for a niche industry. The tool generates passive income. They own the infrastructure. They control distribution. Customers depend on the tool for their operations. Developer B's value is tied to their position in the value chain, not their hourly output. Both started with the same skills. Completely different wealth trajectories. The difference? Positioning. Here's what this looks like across different domains. Employment versus ownership. Employees trade time. Owners trade equity. One has a ceiling, the other scales infinitely. Services versus systems. Service providers get paid per transaction. System builders get paid repeatedly for work done once. Expertise versus access. Experts get hired for their knowledge. Connectors get paid for their network. One scales linearly, the other compounds. The pattern is always the same. Position yourself where value flows through you, rather than past you. The silence weapon. There's a psychological principle that makes fortunes, but gets taught nowhere. Strategic withholding. Most people leak information constantly. They over-explain. They justify. They fill silence with nervous chatter. Every word is a data point that others use to price you, predict you, and ultimately control you. Watch any high-stakes negotiation. The person speaking least usually wins, not because they're being difficult, because they're creating psychological pressure through absence. Silence makes people uncomfortable. The discomfort manifests as concessions, premature offers, and defensive justifications. The person who can sit comfortably in silence extracts value simply by waiting. This applies beyond negotiations. It shows up in how you present opportunities, in how you respond to offers, in how you handle rejection. The desperate explain, the positioned observe. Desperation is always visible, even when you think you're hiding it. It shows in your response time, in your eagerness, in how quickly you say yes, in how much you volunteer. And visibility always gets punished in power dynamics. Think about job interviews. The candidate who talks excessively is trying to prove their worth. The candidate who answers concisely and lets silence linger forces the interviewer to fill gaps, often revealing information about budget, timeline, or desperation to fill the role. Or consider sales scenarios. The salesperson who keeps talking after stating the price undermines their own position. The silence after quoting a number is where deals are made or broken. Whoever speaks first typically concedes. This is why appearing too available destroys leverage. When people know they can access you anytime, you become a convenience rather than a priority. When access to you feels selective, it becomes valuable. The same principle applies to social media and personal branding. Those who share everything, every thought, every struggle, every victory, give away pricing information. They've revealed their floor and ceiling. They've shown their desperation for validation. They've eliminated mystique. Meanwhile, strategists share selectively. They understand that mystery creates perceived value. The less predictable you are, the less exploitable you become. This doesn't mean being dishonest, immodest, or manipulative. It means recognizing that information is power, and power freely given is power lost. The risk paradox. Most people think they're being rational by avoiding risk. They're actually guaranteeing poverty. Here's why. Minimizing risk means minimizing exposure. Minimizing exposure means minimizing upside. You've traded the possibility of transformation for the comfort of predictability. But notice what the perpetually wealthy do differently. They don't avoid risk, they reframe it. Where others see threats to stability, they see mispriced opportunities. Where others see danger, they see information. The difference isn't courage, it's perspective. When you view loss as terminal, every risk feels like a potential catastrophe. When you view loss as tuition, risk becomes data collection. One mindset creates paralysis. The other creates optionality. This is why so many intelligent people stay trapped. They're not lacking information or capability. They're catastrophizing downside while ignoring asymmetric upside. Think about asymmetric opportunities, situations where potential gain vastly exceeds potential loss. Starting a business with minimal capital, worst case, you lose a few $1,000s and some time. Best case, you build an asset worth millions. The downside is bounded. The upside is functionally unlimited. Building a skill that opens entirely new markets. Worst case, you invested time learning something valuable. Best case, you unlock income streams that didn't exist before. Creating content that could reach millions. Worst case, nobody watches. Best case, you build an audience that becomes your distribution channel for life. Yet most people avoid these entirely because the probability of success feels low. They're optimizing for batting average when they should be optimizing for home runs. Here's the mathematical reality. You only need to be right once on an asymmetric bet to change your financial trajectory permanently. But you need to be at bat consistently to get that win. Most people never step up to the plate. They sit in the stands, watching others swing, critiquing their form, explaining why they would do it differently, all while remaining safely broke. The wealthy understand something most don't. The biggest risk is taking no risks at all. Because the world is changing whether you participate or not. Standing still is actually moving backward relative to those who are adapting. Consider technology disruption. Those who saw the internet as risky missed the greatest wealth creation event in history. Those who saw cryptocurrency as risky missed trillion-dollar markets. Those who see AI as risky are missing the next wave. The pattern repeats endlessly. Risk aversion doesn't protect you. It excludes you from upside while leaving you exposed to downside anyway. The identity prison. The hardest part of wealth building isn't learning new strategies. It's unlearning old identities. Most people have internalized a worker identity so deeply they can't see it. It manifests as equating hours with value, seeking permission before acting, requiring external validation, measuring worth through productivity, feeling guilty about rest, believing security comes from employment, thinking wealth is something granted by others. This identity was programmed deliberately. Industrial economies needed compliant workers. Education systems reinforced obedience disguised as virtue. Hustle culture repackaged exhaustion as ambition. Corporate structures rewarded loyalty over independence. And it worked. Brilliantly, most people never question these beliefs. They accept them as natural law rather than social conditioning. But worker psychology caps wealth absolutely, because workers are, by definition, replaceable. Even highly skilled workers, even highly paid workers. If your income depends on trading time, you're in a worker frame. The shift happens when you stop defining yourself by output and start defining yourself by position. Not, what did I produce today, but what did I position myself to capture? This identity shift feels uncomfortable because it contradicts social conditioning. You've been taught that hard work is inherently noble, that sacrifice signals dedication, that struggle proves worthiness. But wealth has never been about worthiness. It's about structural positioning within value flows. Consider the identities that actually generate wealth. The builder. Create systems that work without them. The connector. Facilitates valuable relationships and extracts fees from flow. The allocator directs capital to opportunities and captures returns. The owner holds equity in appreciating assets. The controller manages access to scarce resources. Notice what these have in common. They're positional, not transactional. They capture value from structure, not from hourly effort. This is why working harder rarely creates wealth. You're optimizing the wrong variable. You're trying to win a race by running faster when the actual game is about choosing which race to enter. The identity shift from worker to strategist is uncomfortable because it requires abandoning familiar narratives about fairness, meritocracy, and just rewards. You have to accept that the world doesn't care about your effort. It only cares about your positioning. The composure advantage. Here's something nobody tells you. Emotional stability is the most profitable skill you can develop. Markets reward composure during volatility. Negotiations reward restraint during pressure. Opportunities emerge for those calm enough to notice them, while others panic. Think about every major market downturn. Wealth doesn't vanish, it transfers. From those who sold in panic to those who bought with conviction. From those who needed liquidity immediately to those who could afford to wait. The 2008 financial crisis transferred trillions from overleveraged homeowners to patient capital. The 2020 pandemic crash transferred wealth from panicked retail investors to those who stayed composed. The pattern repeats every cycle. The ability to maintain form under stress is worth millions, because stress reveals everyone's breaking point, and breaking points become exploitation points. This is why living at your financial edge is so dangerous. It eliminates emotional buffer. Without buffer, you're forced to make decisions from desperation. Desperate decisions compound into desperate circumstances. Someone living paycheck to paycheck can't wait for better opportunities. They must accept whatever terms are offered. They must sell assets during downturns. They must take the first offer. This desperation is visible, and it's always exploited. The wealthy engineers slack into their lives deliberately. Not laziness, optionality. Optionality means you negotiate from abundance rather than need. That shift changes every interaction. When you don't need the deal, you dictate terms. When you don't need the job, you command respect. When you don't need to sell, you set price. Need is visible, and it's always exploited. Consider how this plays out in real scenarios. Salary negotiations. The candidate who needs the job accepts the first offer. The candidate with options negotiates for months, if necessary. Real estate. The desperate seller accepts lowball offers. The patient seller waits for market conditions to improve. Investing. The panicked investor sells at the bottom. The composed investor buys the panic. Business deals. The desperate entrepreneur gives away equity cheaply. The positioned founder maintains control. In every case, composure creates leverage. Panic destroys it. But composure isn't natural. It's cultivated through deliberate practice, building financial buffers. So desperation never dictates decisions. Developing emotional discipline so fear doesn't trigger reactivity. Creating systems so stress doesn't cause chaos. Maintaining perspective so temporary setbacks don't feel permanent. This is why meditation, Stoic philosophy, and emotional regulation aren't just self-help, they're financial tools. The calmer you remain during volatility, the more opportunities you can see and capitalize on. The exposure game. Most people expose themselves constantly without realizing it. They reveal urgency by responding too quickly. They reveal dependency by explaining too much. They reveal fear through defensive justifications. They reveal financial status through lifestyle inflation. Each revelation shifts leverage away from them. Meanwhile, strategists cultivate selective opacity. They reveal enough to attract interest, never enough to lose advantage. This isn't secrecy for paranoia's sake. It's understanding that information asymmetry creates value. When you know more about the other party's situation than they know about yours, you see opportunities they don't. This applies to everything. Job hunting. Those who appear desperate accept worse offers. Those who appear selective receive better terms. Never reveal you're unemployed. Never show financial stress. Never accept timelines that aren't yours. Investing. Those who reveal their investment thesis early get front run. Those who accumulate quietly get better prices. This is why insider trading laws exist. Information advantage is that valuable. Negotiations. Those who show their timeline first get pressured. Those who remain flexible control tempo. Deadlines are weapons used against you. Whoever controls time controls outcomes. Business. Those who share their roadmap get copied. Those who execute quietly maintain competitive advantage. Announcement precedes execution for amateurs. Execution precedes announcement for professionals. The pattern repeats endlessly. Whoever moves first loses. Think about dating as an analogy. The person who appears too eager loses attraction. The person who maintains mystery remains interesting. The person who's too available becomes taken for granted. The person who's selective becomes valuable. The same psychology applies to wealth. Scarcity creates value. Abundance signals availability. Availability gets discounted. This is why lifestyle inflation is so dangerous. That luxury car signals to everyone, I have money to burn. That designer wardrobe broadcasts, I care about status. That expensive house announces, I'm leveraged to the limit. Each signal invites predation. Suddenly everyone knows what you can afford. Suddenly prices adjust upward to meet your apparent capacity. Suddenly you're locked into maintaining appearances. Meanwhile, the truly wealthy often appear ordinary. They drive reasonable cars. They wear normal clothes. They live below their means. Not because they're cheap, because they're strategic. They've eliminated signals that attract exploitation. The delay discipline. Speed feels productive. It usually isn't. Fast decisions signal urgency. Urgency signals weakness. Weakness invites exploitation. The wealthy cultivate strategic delay, not procrastination, calculated restraint. They understand that time is leverage only when you're not desperate. Watch how this plays out. Someone offers you an opportunity with a tight deadline. This deal expires in 24 hours. The amateur feels flattered and rushes to accept. The strategist recognizes artificial urgency for what it is, a tactic to prevent comparison and deliberation. Real opportunities don't evaporate overnight. Artificial ones do. The deadline itself reveals that the offer probably isn't as good as it appears. Markets crash, and everyone panics. Sell before it gets worse. The amateur liquidates to stop the pain. The strategist recognizes emotional capitulation and looks for entry points. The best buying opportunities appear when everyone else is selling, but you can only capitalize if you're not panicking yourself. A trend emerges, and everyone rushes in. Get in before it's too late. The amateur fears missing out. The strategist waits to see who's bluffing and who has conviction. Early movers pay premium prices. Patient observers wait for shakeouts. Then they enter with better information and better prices. In each case, the discipline to delay reveals information that premature action obscures. And that information is worth more than any perceived first-mover advantage. Consider what happens when you delay. Information accumulates. You see how others respond. You notice patterns. You identify desperation. Pressure builds on the other side. Your silence forces them to improve offers. Your patience makes them anxious. Alternatives emerge. What seemed like the only option becomes one of many. Competition appears, terms improve. Clarity increases, initial excitement fades, reality becomes visible. True value reveals itself. This is why the wealthy move slowly, not because they're indecisive, because they're selective. They've learned that most opportunities aren't as good as they initially appear. They've learned that FOMO, fear of missing out, is a marketing tactic, not a reality. Think about every major financial regret. How many happened because you rushed, bought at the peak, sold at the bottom, accepted bad terms, partnered with the wrong person, invested in hype? Speed created those mistakes. Delay would have prevented them. But delay requires financial and emotional buffer. This is why building slack is so critical. Slack gives you time. Time gives you leverage. Leverage gives you outcomes. The boundary principle. The word no is one of the most profitable tools you'll ever master. Most people can't say no. They fear seeming difficult, burning bridges, missing opportunities. So they say yes to everything and wonder why they're exhausted, broke, and resentful. But inability to refuse is inability to negotiate. When others know you'll say yes eventually, they have no incentive to improve terms. You've trained them that pressure works. The strategist makes refusal routine. Not out of arrogance, out of economics. Every yes is an opportunity cost. Time and attention are finite. Saying yes to everything means saying yes to nothing that matters. This is why boundaries are financial tools. They filter opportunity quality. They force others to improve offers. They signal that your resources are scarce and therefore valuable. Think about how boundaries operate. Time boundaries. I'm not available for calls before 10 a.m. immediately filters out people who don't respect your schedule. Those who adapt prove they value access. Financial boundaries. My rate is X without justification or apology. Positions you as premium. Those who accept pay willingly. Those who negotiate reveal their position. Relationship boundaries. I don't mix business with friendship. Prevents exploitation disguised as favor asking. Real opportunities don't require emotional manipulation. Commitment boundaries. I need 2 weeks to decide. Eliminates artificial urgency. Quality opportunities accommodate consideration. Notice what happens when you set boundaries. Most people disappear. They were only interested when they thought they could extract value cheaply. Their departure is valuable information. Those who remain after boundaries are set are worth engaging with. They've demonstrated respect for your terms. They've proven they see value worth accommodating. This filtering effect is precisely why boundaries create wealth. They eliminate value destroyers and attract value creators. They prevent your resources from being scattered across low-return activities. The poor accept terms. The wealthy set them. And term setting begins with comfortable refusal. But here's what makes this difficult. Society conditions you to please, to accommodate, to be agreeable. Especially if you're from certain cultural backgrounds, saying no feels like betrayal. You have to unlearn that conditioning, because every yes you give from obligation, rather than alignment, drains your capacity for yeses that matter. By now you've noticed something. The psychology of wealth isn't loud. It's not motivational speeches or hustle mantras or grinding until you collapse. It's quieter than that, more deliberate, more uncomfortable. It's the accumulation of small decisions that compound over years. Choosing strategic positioning over immediate income. Choosing calculated delay over reactive speed. choosing selective disclosure over transparent sharing, choosing internal definition over external validation, choosing discomfort over familiarity, choosing isolation over belonging. These choices separate you. Most people can't tolerate that separation. They need agreement, companionship, constant validation. Those needs pull them back into the herd. The strategist accepts temporary isolation as the price of permanent positioning. Because once positioning is established, everything changes. Opportunities come to you instead of requiring chase. Negotiations shift in your favor without effort. Terms soften naturally. Pressure dissipates. Respect arrives unsolicited. You stop chasing outcomes. You start selecting them. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. There's no moment of sudden enlightenment. No dramatic before and after. It's a slow, deliberate separation from reactive thinking, from emotional decision-making, from herd behavior. And most people watching this will never experience it. They'll feel temporarily inspired, then return to their patterns. They'll forget these principles within hours, react emotionally within days, repeat old mistakes within weeks. Why? Because implementing this psychology is uncomfortable. It contradicts everything you've been taught. It alienates people around you. It requires patience when everyone celebrates speed. It demands silence when everyone rewards visibility. It necessitates boundaries when everyone expects accommodation. But here's what you need to understand. The discomfort is the point. Comfort is what keeps most people trapped. They optimize for feeling good rather than positioning well. They prioritize being liked over being effective. They choose familiar suffering over unfamiliar growth. The wealthy embrace discomfort as information. When something feels wrong, they investigate why. Often they discover they're moving in the right direction, away from herd behavior, away from social conditioning, away from limiting beliefs. You now understand why money flows the way it does, why some rise effortlessly, while others struggle endlessly, why effort doesn't guarantee outcomes, why fairness is irrelevant, why psychology trumps strategy. You see the patterns now, the traps, the leaks, the leverage points. What you do with this awareness determines everything. Most will return to reaction, to emotion, to hoping things will somehow be different while repeating the same behaviors. They'll blame the economy, their circumstances, their luck. Anything except the psychology that keeps them trapped. But a few will begin the uncomfortable work of rewiring, of questioning beliefs, of implementing boundaries, of cultivating composure, of positioning strategically. Those few will find that wealth isn't mysterious. It's simply the natural outcome of psychological alignment with how value actually flows. The game continues, whether you understand it or not. But now you can see the board. The question is, are you willing to play it differently? Because everything changes the moment you do. If this shifted something in you, like this video, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.